I stared at the bank statement in disbelief, my hands shaking. This couldn't be right. I blinked, hoping the numbers would magically change, but they remained stubbornly the same. A $50,000 loan from Richard's parents? When did this happen? "Richard," I called out, my voice echoing through our suburban home. "Can you come here for a second?" I heard his footsteps approaching, and he appeared in the doorway of our home office, an easy smile on his face. "What's up, Lucia?" I held up the statement. "Care to explain this?" His smile faltered for a moment, but he quickly recovered. "Oh, that? It's nothing to worry about, honey. Just a little financial help from Mom and Dad." "A little help?" I felt my blood pressure rising. "Richard, $50,000 is not a little help. When were you planning on telling me about this?" He shrugged, leaning against the doorframe. "I didn't think it was a big deal. You know how my parents are, always wanting to help out." I took a deep breath, trying to calm myself. That's not the point. We're married. We're supposed to make these decisions together. "Look, Lucia," he said, his tone turning patronizing, "I didn't want to bother you with the details. You've been so busy with work lately, I thought I'd handle it." I stood up, facing him directly. "Handle it? By going behind my back? We agreed to be open about our finances when we got married, remember?" Richard's face hardened. "I made an executive decision. Sometimes that's necessary in a marriage." "Necessary?" I scoffed. "What was so necessary that you needed $50,000 without discussing it with me?" He waved his hand dismissively. "It's complicated business stuff. You wouldn't understand." That stung. "Try me," I challenged. Richard sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Look, can we talk about this later? I have a meeting in 10 minutes. I felt the anger bubbling up inside me. "No, we can't talk about this later. This is important, Richard. We need to discuss this now." He checked his watch, impatience clear on his face. "I don't have time for this right now, Lucia. We'll talk tonight, okay?" Before I could respond, he turned and walked away, leaving me standing there, stunned and furious. I sank back into my chair, my mind racing. This wasn't like Richard. We'd always been open with each other, especially about money. What was he hiding? My phone buzzed, startling me. It was a text from my best friend Meredith. "Lunch today? I need girl talk." I smiled despite my anger. Meredith always had perfect timing. "Absolutely," I texted back. "You won't believe what I just found out." As I gathered my things to leave, I noticed a piece of mail on Richard's desk. It was addressed to him, but the return address caught my eye. Stella Jewelers. My stomach twisted. Our anniversary wasn't for months, and my birthday had just passed. I picked up the envelope, weighing it in my hand. It felt like it contained a small box. Should I open it? No, I decided, putting it back down. I wasn't going to stoop to his level of secrecy. But as I walked out the door, the image of that envelope burned in my mind. First the loan, now this mysterious package. What else was Richard hiding? I climbed into my car, my hands gripping the steering wheel tightly. As I pulled out of the driveway, I made a silent vow to myself. I was going to get to the bottom of this, no matter what it took. Richard might think he could keep secrets from me, but he was about to learn just how determined I could be. Little did I know, this was just the beginning of a journey that would turn my entire world upside down. I couldn't shake the unease that had settled over me since discovering Richard's secret loan. As I sat at my desk, trying to focus on work, my mind kept drifting back to our argument. Something wasn't adding up. The ping of an incoming email jolted me from my thoughts. It was from Richard. "Hey, honey, can you transfer $300 to my account for this month's expenses? Thanks." I blinked at the screen, confused. Only $300? That was barely enough to cover groceries, let alone our other bills. Richard's six-figure salary had always covered most of our expenses. What was going on? I picked up my phone and dialed his number. It went straight to voicemail. Typical. "Richard, it's me. We need to talk about this $300. Call me back, please." Hours ticked by with no response. By dinner time, I was fuming. The front door opened, and Richard strolled in, whistling. "Hey, Lucia," he said, dropping his briefcase. "What's for dinner?" I crossed my arms. "We need to talk." His smile faltered. "About what?" "About the $300 you asked for." "Richard, that's not nearly enough for our monthly expenses." "What's going on?" He shrugged, heading for the fridge. "I thought we could tighten our belts a bit, save some money." "Save money," I echoed. Since when have you been concerned about saving, and why now, right after taking out a huge loan from your parents? Richard's back stiffened. He turned to face me, his expression guarded. Look, Lucia, I told you not to worry about that loan. I've got everything under control. Do you? I challenged. Because from where I'm standing, nothing about this seems under control. First the loan, now this. What aren't you telling me? He slammed the fridge door shut. For God's sake, Lucia, can't you just trust me? I'm handling our finances. That's my job. Your job? I felt my temper rising. I thought we were partners in this marriage. When did it become your job to make unilateral decisions about our money? Richard ran a hand through his hair, frustration evident on his face. You're blowing this way out of proportion. It's just money. Just money. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Richard, money is what keeps a roof over our heads and food on our table. It's not just anything. He waved a dismissive hand. You're being hysterical. I've got everything under control. Now, can we please just have dinner and forget about this? I stood there, stunned by his cavalier attitude. This wasn't the Richard I knew. The man I married would never dismiss my concerns like this. Fine, I said, my voice cold. Dinner's in the oven. I've lost my appetite. I turned and walked out of the kitchen, leaving Richard to serve himself. As I climbed the stairs to our bedroom, I heard him muttering under his breath. Once in our room, I sat on the edge of the bed, my mind racing. Something was seriously wrong. Richard's behavior, the secret loan, the measly $300 for expenses. None of it made sense. I pulled out my phone and texted Meredith. Can we meet for coffee tomorrow? I need your advice. Her response was immediate. Of course, everything okay? I stared at the screen, unsure how to respond. Was everything okay? I didn't think so, but I couldn't put my finger on exactly what was wrong. I don't know, I finally replied. I'll explain tomorrow. As I set my phone down, I heard Richard's footsteps on the stairs. I quickly wiped away the tears I hadn't realized were falling and steeled myself for another confrontation. But when he entered the room, he didn't say a word. He just grabbed his pajamas and headed for the bathroom, leaving me alone with my thoughts and a growing sense of dread. Whatever was going on with Richard, I was determined to find out. And I had a feeling I wasn't going to like what I discovered. I couldn't sleep that night, tossing and turning as my mind raced with questions about Richard's behavior. By morning, I was exhausted but determined to get answers. While Richard was in the shower, I did something I never thought I'd do. I checked his phone. My hands shook as I scrolled through his messages and emails. What I found made my blood run cold. Credit card bills, expensive restaurant receipts, hotel charges, all hidden from our joint account. I heard the shower turn off and quickly put the phone back. When Richard emerged, I was sitting on the bed, my face pale. Lucia, you okay? He asked, toweling his hair. I looked up at him, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. Richard, we need to talk about our finances, now. He sighed, dropping the towel. Not this again. I told you, I've got it under control. Really? I stood up, my anger rising. Then explain the credit card bills I found. The restaurants, the hotels. Where's all that money coming from, Richard? His face darkened. You went through my phone? What happened to trust? Trust? I laughed bitterly. You lost that right when you started hiding things from me. Now answer the question. Richard's jaw clenched. It's work-related, client meetings, business trips. You wouldn't understand. Try me, I challenged. He turned away, buttoning his shirt. I don't have time for this. I'm late for work. As he headed for the door, I called after him. If you walk out now, don't bother coming back tonight. He paused, hand on the doorknob, but didn't turn around. Then, without a word, he left. I sank onto the bed, my head in my hands. How had we come to this? My phone buzzed, a reminder of my coffee date with Meredith. I grabbed my purse and headed out, desperate for a friendly face. Meredith was already at our usual spot, 2 steaming cups waiting. One look at my face and she knew something was wrong. Spill, she said, pushing a coffee towards me. I told her everything, the loan, the $300, the hidden expenses. Her eyes widened with each revelation. Lucia, she said gently when I finished, have you considered that Richard might be seeing someone else? The words hit me like a punch to the gut. No, I whispered. He wouldn't. But even as I said it, doubt crept in. The hotels, the expensive dinners, it all suddenly made a horrible kind of sense. What am I going to do? I asked, fighting back tears. Meredith squeezed my hand. First, we're going to get proof. Then we're going to make him pay. We spent the next few hours plotting. By the time I got home, I had a plan. I logged into our joint account, my heart sinking as I saw the balance. Most of our savings were gone. I checked our credit card statements next, finding charge after charge for things I'd never seen or known about. As I dug deeper, I uncovered a web of financial deceit that left me breathless. Richard had been living a double life, spending money we didn't have on God knows what or who. The front door opened, and Richard walked in. He looked tired, his tie loosened. "Lucia," he started, "about this morning." I cut him off. "I know everything, Richard. The credit cards, the drained savings. How could you do this to us?" He paled, stammering. "I can explain." "Save it," I snapped. "I want the truth, all of it, now." Richard slumped into a chair, looking defeated. I made some bad investments. I thought I could fix it before you found out. And the hotels, the restaurants?" I pressed. He wouldn't meet my eyes. "Business meetings, networking." I knew he was lying, but I couldn't prove it. Not yet. "I want access to all our accounts," I demanded. "No more secrets." Richard nodded, looking relieved that I hadn't pushed further. But as he headed upstairs, I caught a glimpse of his phone screen lighting up with a message. From someone named Stella. My heart raced. Who was Stella? And what else was Richard hiding? I had a feeling I was about to uncover something far worse than financial troubles. And I wasn't sure our marriage could survive it. The name Stella haunted me for days. I couldn't shake the feeling that she was more than just a business contact. Richard's secretive behavior and our dwindling finances painted a picture I didn't want to see, but couldn't ignore. I was lost in these thoughts when the doorbell rang. A delivery man stood outside, holding a small package. "Delivery for Richard Thompson," he said cheerfully. I signed for it, my heart racing. The return address read Stella Jewelers, the same name from the message on Richard's phone. With trembling hands, I brought the package inside. I knew I shouldn't open it, but the weight of secrets and lies was crushing me. I had to know. I carefully unwrapped the package, revealing a velvet box. Inside was a stunning diamond necklace, far more extravagant than anything Richard had ever bought me. A small card fell out. "To my dearest Stella, happy anniversary. All my love, Richard." The room spun. I clutched the necklace, its cold diamonds biting into my palm. This was no business gift. This was proof of something far worse. I don't know how long I sat there, staring at the necklace. The sound of Richard's key in the lock jolted me back to reality. I quickly shoved everything back into the box and hid it under a couch cushion. Richard walked in, his usual charming smile in place. "Hey, honey, how was your day?" I stood up, my legs shaky. "Richard, we need to talk." His smile faltered. "What's wrong? Who's Stella?" I asked, my voice surprisingly steady. The color drained from his face. "What?" "I don't know what you're talking about." "Don't lie to me," I snapped, pulling out the package. "Explain this." Richard's eyes widened as he saw the jewelry box. He reached for it, but I snatched it away. "Lucia, it's not what you think," he stammered. "Really? Because I think you're having an affair. I think you've been lying to me about everything, the money, the loans, all of it." Richard's demeanor changed. His shoulders straightened and a cold look entered his eyes. "You had no right to open that. It's none of your business." His words hit me like a slap. "None of my business? I'm your wife." He laughed, a harsh sound that made me flinch. "My wife? Is that what you think you are? You're just a convenience, Lucia, someone to keep the house clean and look good at company parties." I staggered back, shocked by his cruelty. How long?" "Long enough," he sneered. "Stella understands me in ways you never could. She doesn't nag about money or snoop through my things." Tears burned in my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. "So all of this, our marriage, our life together, it's been a lie?" Richard shrugged, reaching for the necklace. "It is what it is. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have plans tonight." As he turned to leave, something snapped inside me. Years of love, trust, and shared dreams crumbled in an instant. In their place, a fierce anger rose. "You're not going anywhere," I said, my voice low and dangerous. He turned back, eyebrow raised. "Excuse me?" I stood tall, meeting his gaze. "You heard me. You're not leaving this house until we sort this out. All of it, the money, the affair, everything." Richard's face darkened. "You can't tell me what to do." "Watch me," I challenged. I've got proof of your financial misdeeds, Richard. One call to the police and your perfect little world comes crashing down. Fear flashed in his eyes, quickly replaced by anger. You wouldn't dare. I pulled out my phone. Try me. We stood there, locked in a silent battle of wills. I knew in that moment that everything had changed. The man I loved was gone, replaced by this stranger who'd betrayed me in every possible way. As I dialed the first digit, I realized there was no going back. Whatever happened next would change our lives forever, and I was ready for it. My finger hovered over the phone, Richard's face a mask of fury and fear. Just as I was about to press the final digit, Meredith's voice echoed in my head. Don't do anything rash, we need proof. I lowered the phone, my heart pounding. You have one chance to explain everything, Richard. One chance to save whatever's left of our marriage. He sneered, but I saw the relief in his eyes. There's nothing to explain. You're overreacting as usual. I took a deep breath, steeling myself. Fine, if that's how you want to play it, I'll find the truth myself. I stormed out of the house, leaving Richard standing there dumbfounded. I drove straight to Meredith's place, tears blurring my vision. Meredith opened the door, took one look at my face, and pulled me into a hug. Oh, honey, what happened? Between sobs, I told her everything. The necklace, Stella, Richard's cruel words. Meredith listened, her face growing darker with each revelation. That bastard, she muttered. Okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to find this Stella, and we're going to get proof of everything. For the next few hours, we played detective. Meredith, it turned out, had a knack for online sleuthing. We scoured social media, piecing together the puzzle of Richard's secret life. Look at this, Meredith said, pointing to her laptop screen. It was a photo of Richard at a restaurant, his arm around a young blonde woman. The caption read, Anniversary dinner with my love, 2 years strong. The date was from last month. 2 years. He'd been cheating on me for 2 years. There's more, Meredith said gently. She pulled up financial records, showing large transfers from our joint account to an unknown recipient. He's been funneling money to her, I whispered, the reality of his betrayal sinking in. Meredith squeezed my hand. Lucia, I hate to say this, but I think it's time to talk to a lawyer. I nodded, numb. You're right. This marriage is over. Just then my phone buzzed. It was a text from Richard. Where are you? Come home. We need to talk. I showed Meredith the message. Her eyes narrowed. Don't go alone. I'm coming with you. When we arrived at the house, Richard was pacing in the living room. He looked up, surprise flashing across his face when he saw Meredith. What's she doing here? He demanded. She's here to support me, I said, my voice steady, while you tear our life apart. Richard's face softened, a look I'd seen him use countless times to charm his way out of trouble. Lucia, baby, I'm sorry. I made a mistake, but I love you. We can work this out. I almost laughed. Work it out? After 2 years of lies? After draining our accounts for your mistress? His eyes widened. How did you? It doesn't matter, I cut him off. What matters is that it's over, Richard. I want a divorce. The charm vanished from his face, replaced by cold anger. You'll regret this, Lucia. You're nothing without me. Meredith stepped forward, fire in her eyes. Watch it, Richard. One more word and I'll show you just how much Lucia doesn't need you. Richard glared at us both, then stormed out of the house, slamming the door behind him. I sank onto the couch, exhaustion washing over me. What do I do now? Meredith sat beside me, her arm around my shoulders. Now we fight. We get you the best lawyer in town, and we make sure Richard pays for every lie, every betrayal. I nodded, a new determination rising within me. Richard thought I was nothing without him? I'd show him just how wrong he was. As I sat there planning my next move, I realized something. The pain of Richard's betrayal was still there, but alongside it was a growing sense of freedom. For the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe. Okay, I said, sitting up straighter. Let's do this. It's time Richard learned that hell hath no fury like a woman scorned. Meredith grinned, a fierce light in her eyes. That's my girl. Let's make him rue the day he ever messed with Lucia Thompson. As we began to plan, I knew the road ahead would be tough. But I was ready. Richard had underestimated me for the last time. Now it was my turn to show him and the world exactly what I was made of. The day of reckoning had arrived. Armed with a folder full of evidence and Meredith by my side, I marched into our house, ready for the final confrontation with Richard. He was in his study, lounging in his leather chair, as if he didn't have a care in the world. The sight of him, so nonchalant after everything he'd done, made my blood boil. "Richard," I said, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me, "we need to talk." He looked up, his eyes narrowing when he saw Meredith. "I thought I told you to come alone." "And I thought we had a faithful marriage," I shot back. "Looks like we were both wrong." I slammed the folder on his desk, spreading out bank statements, hotel receipts, and screenshots of his conversations with Stella. "Care to explain this?" I asked, watching the color drain from his face. Richard's eyes darted between the documents, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. Then, as if a switch had been flipped, his demeanor changed. He leaned back, a smug smile spreading across his face. "So what?" he said, his voice dripping with arrogance. "You caught me. Congratulations. What are you going to do about it?" His cavalier attitude stunned me. "What am I going to do? I'm divorcing you, Richard, and I'm taking everything." He laughed, a cold, cruel sound that sent shivers down my spine. "Good luck with that, sweetheart. You signed a prenup, remember? You'll get nothing." My heart sank. The prenup. How could I have forgotten? But then Meredith stepped forward, a fierce glint in her eye. "Actually, Richard," she said, pulling out another document, "that prenup becomes null and void in cases of infidelity, and we have more than enough proof of that." Richard's smug expression faltered. "You're bluffing." "Try us," I challenged. "We've got statements from the private investigator, testimony from hotel staff, even a signed affidavit from Stella herself." At the mention of Stella's name, Richard's composure cracked. "You talked to Stella?" "Oh, yes," Meredith chimed in. "She was quite helpful once we explained how you've been siphoning company funds to finance your little affair. Turns out she's not too keen on being an accessory to embezzlement." Richard lunged for the phone, but I was quicker. I snatched it away, my heart pounding. "It's over, Richard," I said. "You've lost everything. The company knows about the embezzlement. Stella's gone. And now I'm leaving too." For a moment, I saw fear in his eyes. Then, like a cornered animal, he lashed out. "You think you can survive without me?" he snarled. "You're nothing, Lucia. Just a trophy wife who got lucky. Without me, you'll be back to being a nobody in no time." His words stung, but I stood my ground. "I'd rather be a nobody with dignity than spend another second as your wife." I turned to leave, but Richard grabbed my arm, his grip painfully tight. "You're not going anywhere," he growled. Suddenly, Meredith was there, her phone out. "Let her go, Richard, or I start live streaming. I'm sure your company would love to see how you treat women." Richard released me, his face contorted with rage. "This isn't over," he spat. "Oh, but it is," I said, rubbing my arm. "Goodbye, Richard." As we walked out, I heard the crash of something being thrown against the wall, but I didn't look back. My legs were shaky, and tears threatened to spill, but I held my head high. Outside, I took a deep breath of fresh air. It felt like my first real breath in years. "You did it," Meredith said, squeezing my hand. "You're free." I nodded, a mix of relief and fear washing over me. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, it was mine to choose. As we drove away, I realized this wasn't just the end of my marriage. It was the beginning of my new life, and despite the pain and uncertainty, I was ready to embrace it. The keys to my new apartment felt heavy in my hand as I stood at the threshold. This small, one-bedroom space was a far cry from the luxurious house I'd shared with Richard, but it was mine. All mine. I took a deep breath and stepped inside, the weight of my new reality settling on my shoulders. Freedom tasted bittersweet. "Home sweet home," I murmured to myself, setting down the last of my boxes. My phone buzzed. It was an email from my lawyer. The divorce proceedings were moving forward, but Richard was fighting tooth and nail for every penny. I sighed, feeling the familiar knot of anxiety tightening in my stomach. Just then, another email popped up. This one made my heart race. It was from my boss, requesting an urgent meeting. With trembling fingers, I dialed her number. "Lucia," she said, her voice tense. "We need to talk about your position at the company." My throat went dry. "What about it?" "Richard has been making some claims. He's suggesting that you were complicit in his financial misdeeds." The room spun. "That's a lie," I exclaimed. "I had no idea what he was doing." "I believe you," my boss said, "but the board is concerned. We need to conduct an internal investigation. In the meantime," I knew what was coming before she said it. "You're suspending me. With pay," she added quickly. "But yes, I'm sorry, Lucia. I ended the call, my mind reeling. Richard had struck again, this time aiming for my career. The one thing I had left. I sank onto my new second-hand couch, fighting back tears. How much more could I lose? My phone rang again. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Hello, I said warily. Is this Lucia Thompson? A woman's voice asked. Yes, who's this? This is Stella. I nearly dropped the phone. Stella, Richard's ex-mistress, she finished. Listen, I know you have no reason to trust me, but I need to talk to you. It's about Richard. My heart pounded. What about him? He's not done with you, Lucia. He's planning something big, something that could ruin you completely. I felt the blood drain from my face. What do you mean? Meet me, Stella said urgently. I'll explain everything. I agreed to meet her at a coffee shop downtown, my mind racing. What could Richard possibly have planned? Hadn't he taken enough from me already? As I grabbed my purse to leave, my phone buzzed again. This time it was Meredith. Lucia, turn on the news, now. I fumbled for the remote, flicking on the small TV in my new apartment. My jaw dropped as I saw Richard's face filling the screen. Allegations against my soon-to-be ex-wife, Lucia Thompson, he was saying, his voice dripping with false sincerity. It pains me to reveal this, but she was the mastermind behind the embezzlement scheme. I was merely a pawn in her elaborate fraud. I watched in horror as Richard spun a web of lies, painting me as a manipulative criminal who had used him for his money and connections. He even produced doctored documents and emails to support his claims. My phone was ringing off the hook now. My lawyer, my parents, even old college friends. But I couldn't move, couldn't speak. I was watching my life, my reputation, everything I'd worked for, crumble before my eyes. In that moment, standing alone in my small apartment, watching Richard destroy me on national television, I felt more alone and defeated than ever before. But beneath the shock and despair, a spark of determination flickered to life. Richard thought he'd won. He thought he'd broken me for good. But he'd underestimated me once before, and I wasn't about to let him do it again. With shaking hands, I grabbed my keys and headed for the door. I had a meeting with Stella to get to, and this time, I was going to fight back with everything I had. The game wasn't over yet. Not by a long shot. I stood outside the courthouse, my heart pounding. This was it. The final showdown. Months of legal battles, sleepless nights, and relentless determination had led to this moment. As I walked in, I caught sight of Richard. He looked haggard, a far cry from the polished man I'd married. Our eyes met, and for a moment I saw a flicker of the man I once loved. But then his gaze hardened, and I remembered why we were here. The courtroom was packed. I saw Meredith in the back, giving me a reassuring nod. And there, to my surprise, was Stella, looking nervous but determined. As the judge entered, a hush fell over the room. Richard's lawyer spoke first, weaving a tale of my supposed deceit and manipulation. I gripped the edge of my seat, willing myself to stay calm. Then it was our turn. My lawyer stood, a stack of documents in hand. Your Honor, we have evidence that will prove beyond doubt that Mr. Thompson, not Mrs. Thompson, was the sole perpetrator of these financial crimes. What followed was a meticulous unraveling of Richard's lies. Bank statements, witness testimonies, and, most damning of all, a series of emails between Richard and his co-conspirators, detailing every step of his embezzlement scheme. I watched Richard's face as the truth came to light. His cool facade crumbled, replaced by panic and then defeat. But the final blow came from an unexpected source. Stella stood up, her voice shaky but clear. Your Honor, I have something to add. She produced a USB drive. This contains recordings of Mr. Thompson admitting to his crimes and planning to frame Mrs. Thompson. He thought I was asleep when he made these calls. Richard's face went ashen. Stella, how could you? He hissed. She met his gaze steadily. Because it's the right thing to do. As the judge reviewed the new evidence, I felt a weight lifting from my shoulders. The truth was finally out. The verdict came swiftly. Richard was found guilty on all counts. As the judge detailed his sentence, jail time, and hefty fines, I saw Richard's parents in the gallery, their faces a mix of shock and disappointment. Outside the courthouse, Richard's father approached me. Lucia, he said, his voice heavy with regret, we had no idea. We want to make this right. They offered to pay the settlement we'd agreed upon in the divorce to help undo some of the damage their son had caused. It wouldn't erase the pain, but it was a start. As I watched Richard being led away in handcuffs, a complex mix of emotions washed over me. Relief, sadness, and finally, a sense of freedom. Meredith hugged me tightly. "It's over, Lucia. You did it." I nodded, tears in my eyes. "We did it." In the weeks that followed, life began to take on a new shape. My name was cleared, and I was reinstated at work with a promotion. The settlement from Richard's parents allowed me to start fresh, on my own terms. One sunny afternoon, as I was setting up my new home office, I found an old photo of Richard and me. We were smiling, blissfully unaware of what lay ahead. For a moment, I mourned for that innocent couple. But then I looked around at my new life, built with my own strength, surrounded by true friends, and full of possibilities. I realized that while the journey had been painful, it had led me to a place of authenticity and self-discovery I might never have found otherwise. I picked up the photo and, after a moment's hesitation, placed it in a drawer. It was part of my past, but it no longer defined my future. As I closed the drawer, my phone buzzed. It was a message from my new mentor at work, offering to grab coffee and discuss my ideas for our upcoming project. I smiled, feeling a surge of excitement. This was my life now, full of challenges, yes, but also full of opportunity and genuine connections. "Time for a new chapter," I said to myself, grabbing my keys. As I stepped out into the sunshine, I felt lighter than I had in years. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, I was excited to see where it might lead. Richard had tried to break me, but in the end he'd only made me stronger, and that strength would carry me forward into whatever adventures lay ahead. I wiped the flour from my hands, inhaling the sweet aroma of freshly baked cookies wafting through my kitchen. The front door creaked open, and I turned to see Derek sauntering in, his trademark charming smile plastered across his face. "Hey, darling, smell those cookies, but I have something even sweeter for you," he said, his eyes twinkling with mischief. I couldn't help but smile back, even as a flicker of unease passed through me. There was something off about his expression, a darkness lurking beneath the surface that I couldn't quite place. "Oh, and what might that be?" I asked, trying to keep my tone light. Derek reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. My heart skipped a beat as he dropped to one knee. "Emma Rowland, will you marry me?" The world seemed to stop. This was everything I'd ever dreamed of, wasn't it? Yet that nagging feeling of doubt persisted. "Derek, I don't know what to say," I stammered. His smile faltered for a moment. "Say yes. Of course. We're perfect together, Emma. Think about it. The successful marketing exec and the talented baker. We'll be unstoppable." I hesitated, my hand unconsciously moving to rest on my slightly swollen belly. We'd only known each other for 6 months, and I was already 3 months pregnant. It all felt so fast. "What about the baby?" I asked softly. Derek's eyes hardened for a split second before his charm offensive kicked back in. "That's why this is perfect timing, sweetheart. We'll be a real family." I took a deep breath, pushing my doubts aside. "Yes, Derek. Yes, I'll marry you." He slipped the ring on my finger and pulled me into a kiss. It should have been magical, but something felt off. The next few weeks passed in a whirlwind of wedding preparations. I was at my parents' house, discussing flower arrangements with my mother, when my phone buzzed with a text from Derek. "Sorry, babe. Late meeting. Don't wait up." I frowned, showing the message to my mom. "That's the 3rd time this week," I said. Mom patted my hand. "I'm sure he's just busy with work, dear. Planning a wedding and preparing for a baby is a lot of stress." I nodded, not entirely convinced. "I guess you're right." Later that evening, I was about to head home when I overheard my parents talking in hushed tones in the kitchen. "I don't like it, Marge," my father's gruff voice carried. "Something's not right with that Derek fellow." "Oh, Harold, you're just being overprotective," Mom replied. "Emma's a grown woman. She can make her own choices. But a shotgun wedding? And have you seen the way he looks at her sometimes? Like she's, I don't know, a prize he's won?" I backed away, my heart pounding. Was I making a terrible mistake? The day of the wedding arrived all too quickly. As I stood in the bridal suite, adjusting my veil, my best friend Lily burst in, her face pale. "Emma, I need to talk to you," she said urgently. "Lily, what's wrong? You look like you've seen a ghost." She wrung her hands nervously. I saw Derek outside. He was on the phone, arguing with someone." My stomach dropped. "What did you hear?" Lily hesitated. He said, "Don't worry, baby. Once we're married, I'll have access to her trust fund. Then we can be together." The room spun around me. I clutched the vanity for support, my mind reeling. "Emma?" Lily's voice sounded far away. "What do you want to do?" I looked at my reflection in the mirror, at the hopeful bride staring back at me. In that moment, I knew I had a choice to make, one that would change the course of my life forever. "I need to talk to Derek," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "Right now." I stared at the positive pregnancy test, a mix of joy and dread swirling in my stomach. Derek and I had been married for just 3 months, and already the cracks in our relationship were starting to show. I took a deep breath and headed downstairs to share the news. "Derek," I called out, entering the living room. He was sprawled on the couch, scrolling through his phone. "What is it, Emma?" he asked, not bothering to look up. I swallowed hard. "I'm pregnant." His head snapped up, eyes wide. For a moment I saw a flicker of, was it panic? But then his trademark smile spread across his face. "That's wonderful, darling," he said, standing up to embrace me. But his hug felt stiff, forced. As the weeks passed, Derek's behavior became increasingly erratic. He'd come home late, reeking of alcohol and perfume that wasn't mine. When I'd confront him, he'd turn it around on me. "You're being paranoid, Emma," he'd snap. "This pregnancy is making you crazy." One night, I was folding laundry when his phone buzzed on the nightstand. I shouldn't have looked, but something compelled me. The text message preview made my blood run cold. "Can't wait to see you tonight, baby. Don't forget the champagne. R." My hands shook as I put the phone down. I heard the front door open and Derek's footsteps on the stairs. "Hey, I'm heading out," he called. "Work dinner." I met him in the hallway, my heart pounding. "With R?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Derek's face hardened. "You went through my phone?" "Who is she, Derek?" He laughed, a cold, cruel sound that made me flinch. "You're being ridiculous, Emma. R is a client. Nothing more." But I saw the lie in his eyes. "Don't do this," I pleaded. "We're having a baby. We can work this out." Derek's expression softened, but there was no warmth in it. He cupped my face in his hands. "Oh, Emma. Sweet, naive Emma. Did you really think a baby would change anything?" I recoiled as if I'd been slapped. "What are you saying?" He sighed, dropping his hands. "I'm saying that this," he gestured between us, "was never meant to last. You were convenient, Emma, a pretty little housewife to show off at company parties, but you're not enough. You've never been enough." Tears streamed down my face. "But our vows. Our baby." Derek's laugh was hollow. "Vows are just words, Emma. And as for the baby," he shrugged, "well, I'm sure you'll make a wonderful single mother." With that, he turned and walked out the door, leaving me standing there, shattered and alone. The next few days passed in a blur of tears and sleepless nights. I was curled up on the couch when the doorbell rang. It was Margaret, Derek's mother. "Emma, dear," she said, pulling me into a hug. "I came as soon as I heard. How are you holding up?" I broke down in her arms, sobbing out the whole story. Margaret listened, her face growing darker with each word. "That boy," she muttered. "I raised him better than this." As we sat talking, my phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. "Emma, it's Rachel. We need to talk. Derek's been lying to both of us." I showed Margaret the message, my hands shaking. "Oh, honey," Margaret said, squeezing my hand. "What are you going to do?" I took a deep breath, feeling a spark of determination ignite within me. "I'm going to meet her," I said, "and then I'm going to make Derek pay for what he's done to us." As I typed out a response to Rachel, I felt a shift inside me. The old Emma, sweet, trusting, naive, was gone. In her place was a woman scorned, a mother to be ready to fight for her future. "Game on, Derek," I whispered to myself. "You have no idea what's coming." I stood in the bustling cafe, my heart pounding as I scanned the room for Rachel. A petite blonde waved from a corner table, and I steeled myself as I approached. "Emma?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. I nodded, sliding into the seat across from her. "Rachel, I presume?" She looked nothing like I'd imagined. Young, yes, but with a vulnerability in her eyes that caught me off guard. "I'm so sorry," Rachel blurted out. "I had no idea Derek was married. He told me you two were separated." I felt a familiar ache in my chest. "How long?" I managed to ask. 6 months, she whispered. "But last week I saw his wedding ring. When I confronted him, he laughed it off, said it didn't mean anything. Just anger flared inside me. That sounds like Derek." Rachel's eyes widened. There's more. I think he's been stealing from the company. I saw some suspicious transfers on his laptop. My mind raced. Could this be the leverage I needed? Our conversation was cut short by my phone ringing. It was the hospital. I was in labor. I have to go, I said, standing abruptly. My water just broke. Rachel looked panicked. Do you need help? Should I call Derek? I shook my head. No, I'll be fine on my own. But as I rushed to the hospital, pain searing through me, I realized how alone I truly was. Hours passed in a blur of agony and fear. Where was Derek? I'd left messages, but he was nowhere to be found. As another contraction hit, I gripped my mother's hand. I can't do this, I sobbed. Mom stroked my hair. Yes, you can, Emma. You're stronger than you know. With one final push, my daughter entered the world. As I held her tiny form, a fierce love unlike anything I'd ever known washed over me. Hello, Ava, I whispered. It's just you and me now. It wasn't until hours later that Derek finally showed up, reeking of alcohol. Where have you been? I hissed, careful not to wake Ava. He shrugged, barely glancing at the baby. Out. Had some things to take care of. Things? I echoed, disbelief turning to rage. Your daughter was being born. Derek's eyes hardened. Don't start, Emma. I'm here now, aren't I? Get out, I said, my voice low and dangerous. He laughed. You can't be serious. I know about Rachel, I spat. And the money you've been stealing. Get out before I call security. For a moment, fear flashed across Derek's face. Then his mask of indifference slipped back into place. Fine, he sneered. Have fun playing single mom. We both know you can't handle it. As he stormed out, I felt a strange mix of relief and terror. What had I done? The next few days were a haze of sleepless nights and tearful phone calls. My parents were a godsend, helping with Ava and offering words of encouragement. You've got this, sweetheart, Dad said one evening, as I struggled to soothe a colicky Ava. One day at a time. A week after bringing Ava home, I received a text from Rachel. Emma, I have proof of Derek's embezzlement. Meet me tomorrow? As I typed my reply, a plan began to form in my mind. Derek had taken so much from me. My trust, my security, my dreams of a happy family. But I refused to let him take my future. I looked down at Ava, peacefully sleeping in her bassinet. We're going to be okay, little one, I whispered. Mommy's going to make sure of it. With newfound determination, I began to plot my revenge. Derek had no idea what was coming, but he was about to learn that hell hath no fury like a woman scorned, especially when that woman is a mother protecting her child. The first few months of single motherhood were a blur of sleepless nights and tear-stained onesies. Ava was colicky, and I was a mess. But with each passing day, I found a strength I never knew I had. One particularly rough morning, as I rocked a wailing Ava, my mom appeared at my door with a casserole and a determined look. Emma, honey, she said, taking Ava from my arms. You need a break. Go take a shower, I've got this. I hesitated, but the allure of hot water and 5 minutes of peace was too tempting to resist. As I stood under the spray, I felt the weight of the past few months wash over me. I sobbed, letting out all the pain and frustration I'd been holding in. When I emerged, feeling somewhat human again, I found Mom in the kitchen, Ava peacefully sleeping in her arms. How did you do that? I asked, amazed. She smiled. Years of practice, dear. Now sit down. We need to talk about your future. Over the next hour, we hatched a plan. I'd start a small baking business from home, allowing me to care for Ava while earning an income. It was terrifying and exhilarating all at once. Weeks passed, and word of my baked goods spread through the neighborhood. I was exhausted but fulfilled, finally feeling like I was regaining control of my life. Then, on a crisp autumn morning, everything changed. I was elbow-deep in cookie dough when there was a knock at the door. I opened it to find Derek standing there, looking haggard but still infuriatingly handsome. What are you doing here? I asked, my voice cold. He ran a hand through his hair. I need your help, Emma. I've lost everything. My job, my apartment. Rachel left me. I felt a twisted sense of satisfaction, quickly followed by anger. And that's my problem because I'm still Ava's father, he said, his eyes pleading. I want to make things right, for her. I was about to slam the door in his face when Ava toddled into view. Dada? She said, her little face lighting up. My heart clenched. I couldn't deny her a relationship with her father, no matter how much I wanted to. You can see her, I said finally, but on my terms, and you need to get your life together first. Derek nodded eagerly. I will, I promise. Thank you, Emma. As he left, I felt a mix of emotions churning inside me. Had I made the right decision? That night, as I was going through some old papers, I stumbled upon our joint bank statements. Something caught my eye, a series of large withdrawals made just before our separation. With growing horror, I realized Derek had emptied our savings account. Fury coursed through me. How dare he come here, playing the repentant father, when he'd stolen our daughter's future? I called my parents, my voice shaking with rage as I explained what I'd discovered. "Oh, sweetheart," Dad said, his voice grave. "You need to talk to a lawyer. This changes everything." The next morning, I made 2 calls. The first was to a highly recommended divorce attorney. The second was to Derek. "We need to talk," I said when he answered. "And this time you're going to tell me the whole truth, or so help me, you'll never see Ava again." There was a long pause before Derek replied, his voice uncharacteristically small. "Okay, Emma, you're right. It's time you knew everything." As I hung up, I felt a strange calm settle over me. This was it, the moment that would define our future. I looked at Ava, playing happily with her blocks, blissfully unaware of the storm brewing. "It's gonna be okay, baby girl," I whispered, more to myself than to her. "Mommy's gonna make sure of it." With renewed determination, I began to prepare for the battle ahead. Derek had no idea what was coming, but I was ready. It was time to fight for the future Ava and I deserved. The aroma of freshly baked cinnamon rolls filled the air as I put the finishing touches on Ava's birthday cake. 5 years had passed since that fateful day when Derek walked out on us, and life had taken unexpected turns. "Mommy, is it time yet?" Ava's excited voice called from the living room. I smiled, my heart swelling with love. "Almost, sweetie. Why don't you help Grandma set the table?" As I watched Ava skip off, I marveled at how far we'd come. My little home bakery had flourished thanks to word of mouth and a loyal customer base. It wasn't always easy, but we were making it work. The doorbell rang, and I wiped my hands on my apron before answering. To my surprise, it wasn't a guest for Ava's party, but a smartly dressed woman I didn't recognize. "Emma Rowland?" she asked, her tone professional. I nodded, a knot forming in my stomach. "I'm Olivia Chen from Le Petit Gâteau. We've heard great things about your baking, and we'd like to offer you a position as our new pastry chef." My jaw dropped. Le Petit Gâteau was one of the most prestigious restaurants in the city. This was the opportunity of a lifetime. I'm flattered," I stammered. "But I have a daughter to consider, and my home business." Olivia smiled warmly. "We understand. The position comes with flexible hours and a substantial salary increase. Why don't you come by tomorrow for a trial run?" As she left, my mind was reeling. This could change everything for Ava and me. But could I really balance it all? The party was a whirlwind of laughter and sugar-fueled excitement. As I watched Ava blow out her candles, I made a silent wish for guidance. The next day, I dropped Ava off at school and headed to Le Petit Gâteau, my stomach in knots. The kitchen was a hive of activity, and I threw myself into the work, losing track of time as I created delicate pastries and intricate desserts. It wasn't until I glanced at the clock that I realized with horror that I was late picking up Ava. I rushed out, apologizing profusely to the head chef. When I arrived at the school, Ava was sitting alone on the steps, her little face tear-stained. "I'm so sorry, baby," I said, pulling her into a hug. Mommy lost track of time. Ava's lower lip trembled. "You forgot about me?" Her words pierced my heart. "Never, sweetheart. I could never forget about you." As we drove home, I wrestled with my decision. The job was amazing, but at what cost? Just as we pulled into our driveway, my phone rang. It was Olivia, offering me the position. "We were impressed with your work today," she said. "We'd love to have you join our team." I took a deep breath, about to decline, when Ava spoke up from the back seat. "Mommy, did you make yummy cakes today?" I smiled at her through the rearview mirror. "I did, sweetie. How would you feel if Mommy made cakes at a fancy restaurant sometimes?" Ava's eyes lit up. "Can I come and taste them?" Suddenly, I saw a way forward. "Olivia," I said into the phone, "I'd love to accept, but I need to discuss some terms about my schedule." After hanging up, I turned to Ava. "How about we celebrate with some ice cream?" As we sat at the kitchen table, enjoying our sundaes, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. We could make this work. I could have my career and be there for Ava. But just as I was basking in this moment of triumph, a familiar face caught my eye through the window. Derek was walking up our driveway, looking as handsome and charming as ever. My blood ran cold. What was he doing here? And why now, when everything was finally falling into place? As the doorbell rang, I knew I had to make a decision. Face Derek and potentially disrupt the life we'd built, or pretend we weren't home and keep him out of our lives for good. Ava looked at me, curiosity in her eyes. "Mommy, who's that man?" I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what was to come. "That, sweetheart, is your father, and it's time we had a long overdue conversation." The aroma of roast turkey filled Margaret's house as I put the finishing touches on my pumpkin pie. Thanksgiving had always been a big deal in the Rowland family, but this year felt different. Tension hung in the air like a thick fog, and I couldn't shake the feeling that everything was about to change. "Emma, dear, could you help me with these plates?" Margaret called from the dining room. As I arranged the china, I caught sight of Derek through the window, pulling up in his flashy sports car. My stomach churned. It had been months since I'd last seen him, and the memory of our encounter at Le Petit Gâteau still burned. "Grandma, look, Daddy's here!" Ava squealed, running to the door. I exchanged a glance with Margaret, whose lips were pressed into a thin line. She knew as well as I did that Derek's presence would complicate things. The moment Derek walked in, the atmosphere shifted. He scooped Ava up, showering her with kisses and presents, while barely acknowledging me or his mother. As we gathered around the table, I could feel the weight of unspoken words pressing down on us. Margaret cleared her throat, her voice strained as she asked us to join hands for grace. That's when I saw a flash of red on Derek's collar. Lipstick. My heart raced as I remembered Rachel, the young woman I'd seen him with at the restaurant. Throughout the meal, Derek regaled everyone with tales of his business successes, carefully omitting any mention of his personal life. But I couldn't stay silent any longer. The truth was clawing its way up my throat, demanding to be heard. "So, Derek," I said, my voice steadier than I felt, "how's Rachel doing these days?" The table fell silent. Derek's fork clattered against his plate. I don't know what you're talking about," he stammered, but the panic in his eyes told a different story. "Oh, I think you do," I pressed on, fueled by years of pent-up anger. "I saw you with her at Le Petit Gâteau. You looked quite cozy." Margaret gasped, her eyes darting between Derek and me. "Son, what is she talking about?" And just like that, the dam broke. Words poured out of me, every lie, every betrayal, every moment of heartache Derek had caused over the years. I told them about the affair, the stolen money, the broken promises. Derek's face contorted with rage. "You don't know what you're talking about," he shouted, slamming his fist on the table. "I've always provided for Ava." "Provided?" I laughed bitterly. "You mean the child support checks that bounce half the time? Or the promises to show up that you never keep?" Margaret's face had gone pale. "Derek, is this true? Have you been lying to all of us?" For a moment I saw a flicker of shame cross Derek's face, but it was quickly replaced by his usual charm offensive. "Mom, you know me," he said, reaching for Margaret's hand. "Emma's just bitter. She's always been jealous of my success." But Margaret pulled away, her eyes filled with a mixture of hurt and disappointment. "I think I'm finally seeing you clearly for the first time, Derek, and I don't like what I see." The room erupted into chaos. Derek yelled, Margaret cried, and Ava, confused and frightened, clung to my leg. In the midst of it all, I felt a strange sense of calm. The truth was finally out. As Derek stormed out, slamming the door behind him, I turned to Margaret. Her face was streaked with tears, but there was a resolve in her eyes that I'd never seen before. "Emma," she said, taking my hand, "I owe you an apology, and I think it's time we had a long talk about how we're going to make things right." In that moment, looking at Margaret's determined face and feeling Ava's small hand in mine, I realized that this was far from over. The real battle was just beginning, and I needed to be ready for whatever came next. The weeks following Thanksgiving were a whirlwind. With Margaret's unwavering support and my parents rallying around me, I felt stronger than ever. But I knew Derek wouldn't go down without a fight. I was in the bakery, up to my elbows in bread dough, when my phone buzzed. It was Rachel. "Emma, we need to talk. It's about Derek." My heart raced as I agreed to meet her at a nearby cafe. When I arrived, Rachel looked a mess, her eyes red-rimmed, her usually perfect hair disheveled. "He's been lying to me," she blurted out. "To everyone. I found documents. Emma, he's been embezzling from his company, and there's more." As Rachel spilled Derek's secrets, my mind reeled. The affairs, the stolen money, the web of lies, it was worse than I'd imagined. "I'm so sorry," Rachel sobbed. "I had no idea about you and Ava. I'm leaving him." I reached across the table, squeezing her hand. "It's not your fault. Derek fooled us all." Armed with this new information, I felt a surge of determination. It was time to end Derek's games once and for all. But Derek had one last card to play. The next morning, as I opened the bakery, he was waiting for me. "Emma," he said, his voice honey-sweet, "we need to talk." I steeled myself, letting him in. "Make it quick, Derek, I have work to do." I did. He paced the kitchen, running his hands through his hair. "I've been thinking about us, about our family. I want to make things right." I laughed bitterly. "Right? After everything you've done?" "I know I've made mistakes," he pleaded. "But I love you, Emma. I love Ava. Give me another chance." For a moment, I saw a flicker of the man I'd fallen in love with, but then I remembered Rachel's words, the years of lies and betrayal. "No, Derek," I said firmly. "It's too late for that." His face darkened. "You don't want to do this, Emma. I can make things very difficult for you." "Are you threatening me?" I asked, my voice steady despite my pounding heart. "I'm just saying, it would be a shame if something happened to your little bakery, or if Ava found out what a vindictive bitch her mother really is." White-hot anger surged through me. "Get out," I hissed. "Now." As Derek turned to leave, a small voice piped up from the doorway. "Mommy? Why is Daddy being mean?" Ava stood there, her eyes wide with confusion and fear. Derek's face paled. "Sweetheart, it's not what you think," he stammered. But Ava backed away, tears welling in her eyes. "You're a bad man," she whispered before running upstairs. Derek looked stricken. "Emma, Save it," I snapped. "You've done enough damage. But let me make one thing clear. If you ever threaten me or Ava again, I'll make sure everyone knows exactly what kind of man you really are." As Derek slunk out, I sank to the floor, my body shaking with adrenaline and emotion. I'd stood up to him, but at what cost? How could I protect Ava from the fallout? My phone buzzed. A text from Margaret. "Just heard from Derek. Are you okay? Do you need me to come over?" I was about to reply when I noticed something odd. The safe where I kept the bakery's cash was ajar. With trembling hands I opened it, my heart sinking as I realized the truth. It was empty. Every last dollar gone. In that moment, as I stared at the bare safe, Ava's sobs echoing from upstairs, I felt the weight of everything crashing down on me. How could I have been so blind? So trusting? But as I clenched my fists, a new resolve hardened within me. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Derek had taken my money, threatened my daughter, and tried to manipulate me one last time. Now, it was my turn to fight back, and this time, I wouldn't stop until justice was served. The morning sun streamed through the bakery windows as I surveyed the empty shelves. Derek's theft had left me with nothing, but I refused to let it break me. I had one last card to play. "Are you sure about this, Emma?" Margaret asked, her voice laced with concern. I nodded, my jaw set with determination. It's time Derek faced the consequences of his actions. With trembling fingers, I dialed the number Rachel had given me. "Hello? This is Emma Rowland. I have information about Derek Rowland's embezzlement scheme." The next few hours were a whirlwind. Police officers swarmed the bakery, taking statements and collecting evidence. As I watched Derek being led away in handcuffs, a mix of emotions washed over me. Relief, sadness, and a glimmer of hope for the future. Weeks passed, and slowly, life began to take on a new rhythm. The community rallied around me, offering support and encouragement. Margaret, bless her heart, had set up a GoFundMe to help me rebuild the bakery. One particularly busy morning, as I juggled trays of fresh croissants, the bell above the door chimed. I looked up to see a tall, distinguished man with kind eyes. "Emma Rowland?" he asked, smiling warmly. "I'm Robert Weinstein. I heard about your situation and I'd like to help." Robert, it turned out, was a successful restaurateur with a passion for mentoring up-and-coming bakers. Over coffee and my signature cinnamon rolls, we talked for hours about recipes, business strategies, and dreams for the future. As the weeks turned into months, Robert became more than just a mentor. His steady presence and unwavering support helped heal wounds I didn't even know I had. And Ava adored him. often begging him to tell her stories about his travels and culinary adventures. On the day of Derek's sentencing, I stood in the courtroom, my heart pounding. As the judge read out his verdict, guilty on all counts, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. It was finally over. Outside the courthouse, surrounded by my parents, Margaret, and Robert, I took a deep breath of fresh air. "So what now?" my mom asked, squeezing my hand. I smiled, looking at the faces of those who had stood by me through it all. "Now, we build something beautiful." And that's exactly what we did. With Robert's guidance and the community's support, my little bakery blossomed into a thriving business. But more importantly, I blossomed too. 1 year to the day after Derek's arrest, I stood in my newly expanded kitchen, putting the finishing touches on a wedding cake. As I piped delicate sugar flowers, I caught sight of my reflection in the polished steel countertop. The woman staring back at me was stronger, wiser, and happier than I'd ever been. "Mommy, look!" Ava's excited voice pulled me from my reverie. She proudly held up a slightly lopsided cupcake, frosted in every color of the rainbow. "I made it all by myself." I scooped her up, planting a kiss on her flour-dusted cheek. "It's beautiful, sweetheart. Just like you." Robert appeared in the doorway, his eyes twinkling. "I'd say you both inherited the baking gene," he chuckled, wrapping us in a warm embrace. As we stood there, flour-covered and laughing, I realized that this moment of pure joy and love was what I'd been fighting for all along. Derek had tried to break me, but instead he'd set me free. Free to find my strength, my voice, and a love that was real and true. I looked at Robert, at Ava, and at the life we were building together. "You know what?" I said, my heart full to bursting. "I think it's time for a celebration. Who wants to help me bake a new beginnings cake?" As Ava cheered and Robert rolled up his sleeves, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. The road had been long and painful, but it had led me here, to a place of love, strength, and endless possibilities. And for that, I was grateful. Life, I realized, was a lot like baking. Sometimes you had to endure the heat to create something truly sweet. And this was the sweetest victory of all.